39th Barcelona indoor trial is round 2 of the 2016 FIM X-Trial World Championship. The sport returns to its heartland in Catalonia with a new course design and a new series leader after Adam Raga's surprise victory at round 1 in Sheffield. With 2 of the top 4 moving to new teams during the winter and a new championship leader, 2016 opened as a season of change in Sheffield. It was the field's youngest member, Sweden's Eddie Karlsson, who finished at the back of the pack with a full sweep of 6 fiascos and 9 marks behind his nearest rival, wildcard James Dable. Alexandra Ferrer was involved in a separate battle with Takehisa Fujinami over 6th. A costly failure in Section 5 kept him from beating the Japanese star, despite becoming the first rider to battle through the challenging Section 6. Fujinami was looking for a return to the podium after a season on the X-Trial sidelines, but dropped 3 marks in Section 2, failed Section 6, and eventually finished 9 marks back from the finalists in 5th. Gironi Fajardo was the only rider to fail Sections 3 and 5 in the final, as he took 4th. It was nonetheless a strong vertigo debut for Fajardo, who fell just 3 marks short of the team's first ever podium. (2002) world champion Albert Cabastan had dropped behind Fajardo after a failure in Section 4 of the final, but crucially recovered the lost points with a great ride in Section 5. He finished some way back from the top 2, a good recovery ride taking him to 3rd. Tony Bowe was beaten for the first time ever in Sheffield. The reigning champion restricted to 2nd in his most successful arena. Bowe's failure in Section 2 of the final proved the difference between the top 2. He was only able to recover 1 mark from the remaining 4 sections. Bowe's error paved the way for Adam Raga to take victory and the championship lead. With just 4 marks from the day's 12 sections, Raga was the only rider not to fail a section all night in an outstanding debut for the TRS team. The round 1 results generally followed the 2015 form book, but a surprise at the top of the leaderboard. A tough winter of preparation for Adam Raga, yielding a brilliant victory. After a turbulent 2015 with Gas and 7 seasons with just 1 victory, Adam Raga's bold winter decision to move to newcomers TRS paid off handsomely with a round 1 win. I'm very happy to have started the championship with a win, especially the way I did it in Sheffield, where I rode really well right through the last section, where there was so much pressure. But we controlled that really well, and we got through that last section that was very difficult, and to finish the race with a pretty low score. Winning the first X-Trial race for TRS is a record. Winning with a completely new brand is very difficult to do. There was a lot of effort behind it, so it was great. It gives us a lot of motivation for the future, because it shows we have a competitive bike. Now we just have to continue working hard. The development of a trial bike is very complicated. It's difficult to make the bike work, to stop it from breaking down, and difficult to make it competitive. But the most important thing to me is having the right people on board, to have a good project, and with the help of Jordi and the whole team behind him, we've got a good bike, a powerful bike that is already giving results. From when I signed my contract, the first day of my holidays, the following day I was at Jordi's house working on the bike as it was then and developing it. When you're a rider, you imagine the perfect bike. You dream of things to have on your bike. And so to see that work done by another person without even speaking to him and knowing that the bike adapts to me, well, I can see the future in it.
Que la moto esta se adapta a mí, que es lo que me gusta y le veo mucho futuro.
Having worked with Adam 10 or so years ago means we have a relationship that goes beyond friendship.
aparte de amistad, ¿no? Entonces,
So I joined the team and I'm learning more and more. I'm learning how I need to work, how I need to train and how I need to think in key moments of the race. When I score a 5 or a clean, when you're in the final and need to win, it's a bit of everything really.
we
had a prototype which he liked, so we tried to set everything up to make it a reality. For us it's almost a dream to have Adam back home. Winning a race in the World Championship or the title itself as a rider is incredible, but using that experience and being able to do this type of work is very similar in terms of preparation, the perfection of the bike and the dedication to see through your ideas.
To
have such a great rider and for him to win in Sheffield was very emotional, and as I say, a very similar feeling, one which is certainly very enjoyable. When a new season starts, it's an opportunity for everyone. This year, I've arrived very motivated with a new team, and I'm going to keep fighting just as I have before to achieve. It will be difficult because we're competing against the best rider of all time, but we'll give our best and try to win. A total of 8,200 spectators flooded the 1992 Olympic Park to the Palau San Jordi for the second round of the 2016 Championship. The venue is the traditional home to some of the most brutal sections in the series. Lighting and music also contributed heavily to an outstanding pre-race atmosphere. The 7 permanent riders were joined by rising Spanish star Jaime Busto to complete a lineup of 5 home representatives at round 2. The 2 youngest riders in the field led out the Barcelona X Trial, Eddie Carlson opening the sections as he did at the curtain raiser in Sheffield. The British Grand Prix was an undoubted disaster for the Swede, failing each of the sections and finishing 12 marks back from the nearest series regular. But he made a more competitive start to the Barcelona X Trial with a 2-mark score on section 1. The Swede dropped 1 mark with a misjudgment through the rocks and finished just a second short of the time allowance as he put down the first section target for Jaime Busto. The Basque rider is considered a potential dominant force in the future of trials, but for now is serving his apprenticeship in the sport and struggled to last place in each of his 2015 wildcard appearances. 2016 had a more promising start with a clean in section 1, but haste and impetuousness cost him 4 consecutive failures that dropped him out of contention. Carlson overhauled Busto in section 5 with a workmanlike 2-mark effort and his best display of the season. Another narrow timeout, this time by just 3 seconds on section 6, saw him finish on a lap total of 20 and with half of the sections completed. Busto would need to run clean through section 6 to tie the scoring. But the Spaniard conceded a mark on observation, reaching the top of the section's tower, and another on time to finish 2 marks back from Carlson in the standings. A 22-mark lap would eventually leave him bottom of the leaderboard in a 3rd consecutive X-Trial appearance. Alexandre Ferrer and Takehisa Fujinami were separated by just 4 marks in Sheffield, and their rivalry was resumed as the 2 outsiders for the final staked their claims. Ferrer became the latest victim of the near vertical step on section 2 as he dropped his first marks of the lap. But Fujinami conceded 6 marks over the first 2 sections and remained a mark behind the Frenchman after he failed section 3, accruing penalty marks on observation and on time. Ferrer further improved his position with a second clean of the lap, becoming the first rider to successfully complete section 4. But a crucial failure in section 5 eventually cost him a place in the final and dropped him immediately 3 marks behind his direct competitor. Fujinami worked through the same section with just 1 dropped mark, and the ranking of the 2 riders would be decided in the final section. Ferrer fell 6 seconds short of the time allowance across the tower, meaning Fujinami could score a maximum of 2 marks to finish above the Frenchman. The veteran star completed the section bang on time and clean on observation to card a lap total of 13. To guarantee qualification before the appearance of the final pair, Jeroni Fajardo and Albert Cabastan would need to score 12 marks or fewer to better Fujinami's tally. 3 of the qualification positions were tied in Sheffield. The level pushed constantly higher among the sport's top 4, but Albert Cabastan put qualification hopes at risk with an error and shock 5-mark score in section 1. Cabastan was the only rider to drop more than 2 marks on the section with an uncharacteristic mistake, leaving himself with ground to make up against more challenging obstacles. He became the first rider to clean section 2 as he brought himself back onto par with Fujinami. Jeroni Fajardo, meanwhile, had ridden clean through section 1, accruing 4 marks in the first 3 sections, where Fujinami had notched 11 at the same point halfway through the lap. But an error on section 4 left him under pressure in the closing stages of qualifying, with only 3 marks to spare and 2 sections to complete. Cabastan moved 3 marks ahead of his direct rival with a single mark score where Fajardo had failed, and guaranteed progression with another 1-mark score on section 5. Jeroni Fajardo had to wait to section 6 to confirm his place in the final, needing a maximum of 1 mark to remain above Fujinami in the leaderboard. He worked quickly through the section, attempting to avoid the time penalties that 3 of the 4 riders prior to him had accrued, finishing the lap 1 mark ahead of his Japanese rival and booking a guaranteed place in the final. Separated by just 4 marks in both qualifying and the final at round 1 in Sheffield, Tony Bow and Adam Raga were expected to lead the scorers again on home ground in Barcelona. Both ran clean through section 1, Raga dropping his first mark of the lap on section 2. Tony Bow's brilliant Barcelona record continued as he headed towards a perfect lap, cleaning the opening 3 sections and guaranteeing his place in the final by the end of section 4. There were no uncharacteristic errors from the reigning champion, and Raga laboured to remain in touch. The championship leader notched a 2nd mark on section 4. His place in the final was secured by the time he entered section 5, but a failure gave Bow's leading margin a more emphatic look. Raga went on to a clean in Section 6 to take second in qualifying. But there was no touching Tony Bowe, who finished with a faultless clean and the first seeding position to the final. A closer tussle for the final qualification position in Barcelona than in Sheffield, with Cabestan and Fajardo both failing sections to leave their progression to the final in doubt until the closing stages. I have to congratulate the organiser, because compared to previous years the sections were much more accessible and we enjoyed them a lot more. I enjoyed riding today. It was very close. I made a few small mistakes and I think I was probably capable of more. Well, what's done is done, and we'll see if we can push on at the next race in Austria, where I hope I can do better. Today's sections were fairly easy, but it was also easy to make 5 points. Gironi and I both made a couple of mistakes, but lots of riders had 5s in different sections, which made it a good trial. So it was a good idea to change the sections around to make them different from previous years. The lead Spanish quartet, who locked out the top 4 places throughout 2015, performed their exploits in Barcelona as they did in Sheffield to decide the podium places between them. 7 sections in the final here tonight compared to 6 in the final in Sheffield. Errors will be punished slightly less harshly, therefore. More opportunities to recover from any early errors. Gironi Fajardo first up onto the rock section, a series of 4 rock islands here for the riders to cross. In theory, this should be the easiest of the sections in the final, but Albert Cabestan failed in reverse configuration with the slightest misjudgment. The finalists keen not to drop any marks in this opening battle. And clean so far for Gironi Fajardo in Section 1, his minder encouraging him to carefully place the back wheel to prepare himself for this final assault at the close of Section number 1. Well inside on time here, Gironi Fajardo. And through in 51 seconds for the first clean of the night's final. Gironi Fajardo with nothing to his name, and the other 3 riders under slightly more pressure after a solid start from the Vertigo rider. Albert Cabestan, second to take on this section then. The 2002 world champion, looking to add to his 85 career podium finishes. A slightly faster start than that of Gironi Fajardo. Cabestan has been watching on and knows now how to complete this section in reverse configuration, bearing in mind that in the opposite direction, Cabestan almost cost himself a place through to this final. No such errors so far in section number 1 of the grand finale in Barcelona tonight. Cabestan, who finished 3rd in Great Britain, some way back from the front pair, a confident start to the final for him. That's 2 riders through now section 1 without dropping a mark. Fajardo the first to clean and Cabestan second through. Adam Raga 3rd through the sections here tonight. Championship leader, of course, after his stunning win in Sheffield, the debut for the TRS machine. He's got to try and follow that up with another success in front of his home crowd in Barcelona. The Barcelona winner for 4 consecutive seasons between 2002 and 2005. Adam Raga just balancing himself there, finding things perhaps slightly tougher than the riders before him. But he looks set up for a clean to follow Fajardo and Cabestan through. And effectively will be down to a 6-section finale if Tony Bowe can do the same. Adam Raga just struggling there against an off-camber crest on the top of that rock. But he does balance himself. And well inside on time. He's just asked his minder, actually, how long he's got left on the clock, and now he's through. He was told 15 seconds at the time. He completed the section with 13 seconds to spare in the end. And that's a clean for Fajardo, Cabestan and Raga in section number 1. Tony Bowe, the 4th and final rider to come out into tonight's final, knows that he needs to clean as well to keep pace with the other 3 in this grand final. Winner of 6 consecutive Barcelona X-Trials, the man to beat here tonight. 16 of the last 17 events to take place in Spain have been won by this man, Tony Bowe. faster so far, if anything, than the other 3 riders through, but it's all about minimising errors whilst remaining inside the 60-second time allowance. Cheered on by the crowd, Tony Bow comes through for a clean, so that's all 4 riders through section number 1 without dropping a mark. And effectively, we are back to that 6-section final that we saw in Sheffield, with no errors having been committed in section number 1. On to section 2, the barrels. A series of barrels and cylinders, all with different heights and depths. Just like the cylinder section in Sheffield, really, the curved surfaces giving the riders an incredibly narrow contact patch for the tyre. Again, it's fresh paint over a checkered plate finish. The obstacle's pretty slippery for the riders here tonight. Jeroni Fajardo costing himself a mark there, just leaning the sump on the top of the obstacle. So 1 mark already for Jeroni Fajardo as he works his way through section number 2. The start of this one, the same as section 2 from qualification. Both Fajardo and Raga dropped marks through that stage in qualifying. It's an even tougher level of difficulty in the final because the riders are required to do the same in the reverse direction as well. Timer factor for the finalists as well in this section number 2 in the final. Ramp pointing downwards here for Jeroni Fajardo. That's a mark on time, 60 seconds elapsing there, and he's cost himself another on observation. I would suggest that with the 2 penalty marks already accrued and the mark on time as well, it's going to be a 5 here for Jeroni Fajardo. The foot's down and it's all over for Jeroni Fajardo, the Vertigo rider, with a 5 in section number 2. So Jeroni Fajardo is the first rider to fall victim to the sections here in Barcelona, giving the other 3 an opportunity to stake their claim for a podium position. Albert Cabastan next up. Winner actually of the last round to take place in Spain, the final event of the 2015 season in Oviedo. He's straight up that near vertical step that opens section number 2, the step that provided the riders so many difficulties in qualifying. And he did so on the back wheel as well to avoid any penalty marks. Penalty points awarded for footing, touching any part of the body on the ground or on an obstacle, or for leaning, resting any part of the machine on an obstacle. And of course, marks to be factored in for exceeding the allotted time as well. But this is a much better start for Albert Cabastan than it was for Jeroni Fajardo, who'd already conceded 3 marks by this point. And then the time elapsed as well. Albert Cabastan is going to be tight on time here. Got to try and get through without conceding a penalty mark, but he's fast through the end of the section and down in 57 seconds. A clean for Albert Cabastan, who moves immediately 5 marks clear of Jeroni Fajardo after section 2. So Albert Cabastan, the pace setter early on in this grand final in Barcelona. Adam Raga needs to run clean to keep up the pace. Through the first step without too many difficulties. Continuing his progress through this section number 2. Already 90 podium finishes to his name. Heading well on his way towards a century now, the 4-time world champion Adam Raga. Halfway through section number 2, makes the 180-degree turn and now approaches to return through the section. Of course, the riders have all sampled this section 2 in one direction. This is a journey into the unknown for Adam Raga, but he does have the advantage of seeing Cabastan work his way through very efficiently the close of this section number 2. And Raga similarly placed for time at this stage of the second section in the Barcelona final. 4 seconds to spare for Adam Raga, that's another clean. So 2 successive cleans for both Cabastan and Raga, as they sit tied with 0 marks alongside Tony Bow, who still has section 2 to complete. The first time in Tony's career as a permanent extra rider that he hasn't led after the opening round of the series, after his first defeat in Sheffield. The first time since 2006 that we've had a championship leader other than Tony Bow. halfway through the section and at roughly half-time as well. Tony Bow with 30 seconds then to complete the second half of this section number 2. Just edging himself to the left to bounce down onto the downward ramp, and that's the challenge because the ramp is sending the riders downwards, and who's got to make that bridge up to the black section of this zone? He's done that quite efficiently. And through towards the finish, Tony Bow completes section number 2, 54 seconds, the fastest of the riders through there, and clean, most importantly. 3 riders tied on 0 marks then after section number 2. Still plenty of running left here tonight. 5 more sections to complete, of course. It's a 7-section final in Barcelona. Onto the red-coloured zone then. Gironi Fajardo first up. Oh, first down as well. Couldn't get the front wheel over the lip. The Minder had to catch the front tyre. And it's all over at the moment of departure on section number 3 for Gironi Fajardo. Albert Cabastan now inspecting that step more carefully and laying down some rubber for himself to try and build up some traction at the start of section 3, watched on by his Minder. Straight up to the top, but I think he's going to cost himself a mark there because he's leaning on the top of that step. The curved platforms make it very difficult for the riders to make the step without touching the sump on the lip. Any touching of the bike on the section, of course, is penalised. And we saw in Sheffield a very direct but consistent application of that rule from the newly introduced permanent referee. Here again in Barcelona tonight to score the riders. The observer watching on already has points on his hands to mark for Albert Cabastan, who is going to get through section 3. But he's not happy with his score. 3 marks have been awarded to him by the observer, and he is going to debate it. But as we know, no matter how many times you talk to the referee, it's not going to change anything. Not in any sport, and certainly not in trials. The observer sticking by his decision. 3 marks for Albert Cabastan on section number 3. So Fajardo sits on 10, Cabastan on 3. Raga and Bow yet to drop a mark, but Raga's dropped one there. Had to do exactly the same as Albert Cabastan to make it to the top. The actual crest of that first step isn't deep enough for the riders to be able to rest themselves on it without leaning. So Raga has conceded a mark early on, just as Cabastan did previously. Oh, a little bit of an error there. Misjudgment from Adam Raga as he landed, and that's going to cost him another mark. I think he clipped the sump on the step through landing, and he's down the other side, and he, like Cabastan before him, has been given 3 marks. Raga not happy about his score either, trying to debate it, but it's not going to come to anything, much to the frustration of the crowd here in Barcelona. Bearing in mind that all 4 of these finalists are local heroes, they are guaranteed victory of a local representative here tonight. Tony Bow straight up and straight through. Now that's how the observer wanted it done, all on the back wheel without conceding any marks for leaning. A great opportunity for Tony Bow to open a leading margin after this one, section number 3. Again on the back wheel, very careful not to concede any marks on observation. Largely following the tyre tracks of the 2 riders who've made it through before him. And again on the back wheel, Tony Bow through clean. A 3-mark advantage, he's delighted with that. He had an opportunity and he took it to the maximum extent. That's 3 sections clean now for Tony Bow. Cabastan and Raga both dropping 3 marks there, and Fajardo already slipping back as he gets underway now with section 4, the trunks. 3 upright logs to negotiate here for the riders, bridged by a series of slanted trunks. Gironi Fajardo just making the first jump, and he's come down. Clattered the sump on the step and down to the floor for a 5. That's a 3rd consecutive failure for Gironi Fajardo, who already sits 12 marks behind Raga and Cabastan. Admittedly, both of those riders, as well as Tony Bow, still have to take on this section number 4. Cabastan next up. This is where Gironi Fajardo managed to fail. Cabastan is going to be more cautious here, I would suggest. Asking for advice from his minder, who will position him perfectly before he makes that leap across. It's quite a sizable margin to make, and he's done exactly the same. Clattered the bike onto the other side of the jump, and down he goes to a 5. So gaps starting to emerge out between the riders here in Barcelona. Adam Raga next up. Inconsistent surfaces for the riders to tackle on these opening jumps. Camber as well, the first challenge, because it slopes away from the riders as they try to make a 45-degree leap, but that's how you do it, says Adam Raga. He has got to put a foot down, though, on the other side of the jump, just to steady himself and stop himself from sliding off. Like the cylinders, of course, there's a very narrow contact patch for the riders. That's going to be a second mark for leaning on top of that step. That's the first of the upright logs. There's 2 more to negotiate for Adam Raga, so already accruing marks in the early stages of this section. Needs to try and keep it error-free from here. Here's the third of those upright logs and the last major step of this one, section number 4. The enthusiastic crowd cheering Raga. He is going to be under pressure for time. He's got to make a decision on tactics here. Does he try and rush through and get it inside 60 seconds? Or does he take his time and guarantee avoiding a mark here? He's avoided a mark, and he's down in 58 seconds. 2 marks then for Adam Raga on that section that have been 5'd by both Fajardo and Cabastan. And indeed, Adam Raga able to open out a bit of a margin over the 2 riders behind him now in the standings. Fajardo on 15, Cabastan on 8, Raga on 5. But Tony Bow still yet to drop a mark. One mark drop for Tony Bow. Such a challenge for the riders to make it onto the top of the steps. It really does need to be a perfect landing because the width at the top is barely the distance between the tyres. Bow unable to avoid a mark for leaning there. Adam Raga, though, conceded 2, and at the moment, Tony Bow set to open out another mark in his advantage over Adam Raga. Stood at 3 coming into this section, number 4, and which is going to stand at 4 after it. Tony Bow drops his first mark of the night, but nonetheless leads by 4. Fajardo 15, Cabastan 8, Raga 5, and Tony Bow leads on just 1. Is he on his way towards becoming the king once again of Barcelona? And returning to the top step of the podium, Adam Raga, of course, the championship leader. Gironi Fajardo on to section 5 now. That's an immediate mark on the first step of the white-coloured zone. Series of shapes for the riders to move through here, painted with Barcelona landmarks. That first step, perhaps not the biggest challenge of the section. There's a massive step halfway through it, with a tiny run-up and a long run to the top. That's going to be another mark as well, as he used the top of that block as a fulcrum to pivot himself down. And this is the step I was talking about. That's 3 marks now for Gironi Fajardo, because he had to put a dab down to get to the bottom of the step. And now he's got to try and make it up this near impossible jump without conceding a mark. He's had to jump back. He's going to take a second attempt here. With the applause of the crowd for Gironi Fajardo. He gives it another go, but he's down and his feet are down. It's out of section 5. All over for Gironi Fajardo. 20 marks from the last 4 sections and a 12-mark deficit now to Albert Cabastan. But this looks like one of the toughest sections of the night. This is a more traditional Barcelona section in a sense, with that massive step for the riders to climb halfway through. Cabastan's not going to make the first step, so we're not going to see whether he could have tackled the step midway through the section. That's a 5 for Albert Cabastan as well. So Fajardo 20, Cabastan 13, Raga and Bow seem the leaders in Barcelona tonight. Separate race again for the podium, perhaps, as we had in Sheffield by the end of the night in Great Britain. Bow and Raga were battling it out for victory, and Cabastan and Fajardo tussling over the minor placing. Adam Raga straight up, but will cost himself a mark for leaning. Trying to settle himself in and just move right to the left of that to give himself the best possible run up to the block on the other side. 40 seconds still to go for Adam Raga in this section 5. Finally, he's had to take a dab because he was so hesitant and waiting so long at the top of that first step. He's already on 2 marks then as he builds up to this, the toughest step of section 5. Minder waiting at the top. 20 seconds still on the clock for Adam Raga. But just to make it up this, regardless of time, will be one of the biggest challenges of the night. Here goes Adam Raga. Front wheel gets halfway up, but now he's balanced halfway up the step and he's going to have to make the jump back down. Out of time as well. All over for Adam Raga. So far, section 5 has been simply impossible for these riders. So many times we've seen Tony Bow achieve the impossible here in Barcelona. If he can do the same here in section 5, he'll have a 9-mark lead with 2 sections remaining. A near unassailable advantage for Tony Bow. Making that block on the back wheel, avoiding dropping any marks there. But this is going to be the real challenge of section 5, even for Tony Bow's standards. This looks a tough one. The narrowest of run-ups. Minder waiting at the top for Tony Bow confidently. Almost there, but he's down. Oh, he's down dramatically. From something like 2 meters in height, straight down to the Barcelona arena floor. And by the looks of it, in a little bit of discomfort as well. No great surprise, considering the height from which he fell. These athletes are primed for everything, but they wouldn't necessarily be expecting a massive drop like that one. Tony Bow actually clattering into a cameraman as he comes down. But he looks to be okay. He is riding away from the scene of the incident, so hopefully for Bow and his championship challenge, he'll be able to continue on in the 2 remaining sections. Onto the crates now. 3 steps for the riders to negotiate built out of crates. This is a real physical zone and the longest of the final sections as well, so time will become a factor here. Gironi Fajardo sitting 7 marks behind the 3rd place runner now, consigned to 4th if he fails here, because he's failed 4 consecutive sections now, coming into section 6. Already out of the running for victory. His battle seems to be over 3rd with Albert Cabastan, but he needs to make it through this section 6 with as few drop marks as possible, but he's going to drop to a 5. 5th successive 5-mark score for Gironi Fajardo. He's got a wry smile on his face, but he won't be happy about that. It's been a difficult night since completion of the qualifying phase for Gironi Fajardo. That guarantees Albert Cabastan a podium finish here tonight, but he'll be looking for a space in the top 2 if he can. 2 successive failures for Albert Cabastan coming into this section. If he makes it a 3rd consecutive section fail, then he will fall out of contention for victory. Could still be in with a shout of 2nd, of course, depending on the performance of Adam Raga. Cabastan and Raga separated by 3 marks coming into this section number 6. Cabastan bounding through, but this is where Gironi Fajardo failed. Cabastan just trying to position himself as best he can. You can see what a narrow run-up they've got. Less than a tyre's length to make it up. And Cabastan will slip back as well. Reached up slightly higher than Gironi Fajardo. Tried to get his body weight forward, but it was already too late by then. Minder had to catch the bike. And down to a 5-mark score. Gironi Fajardo and Albert Cabastan both now on 5 marks then. This gives Adam Raga an opportunity to seal a space in the top 2. The championship leader will be guaranteed 2nd if he scores 2 marks or fewer here. That's 1 halfway up the initial staircase of this section 6. The first tower of crates successfully completed then for Adam Raga. The deficit between Bow and Raga gradually increasing through tonight's event. The 4-mark advantage built up by Tony Bowe over sections 3 and 4. None of the 4 riders could make it through section 5, and all of them made it through section 1, so more pressure placed on the other sections in tonight's final. And time running out for Adam Raga to get back into contention for victory. 4 marks the deficit, and he's already dropped a mark so far in section 6, and that's another on time now for Adam Raga. Can he make it through this step that Fajardo and Cabestan have both failed? He's up! That's an excellent ride from Adam Raga. Through he comes to complete section number 6, 75 seconds, so as well as the 2 marks on observation, he's cost himself a mark on time, but it's 2 marks better than either Cabestan or Fajardo. The question is, will it be better than what Tony Bowe can do on section number 6? Bowe can win this trial with a section to spare if he notches a maximum of 1 mark here. I'm certain that that's what he'll be trying to do. Straight up once again for Tony Bowe, a confident start. Will it be enough to seal this Barcelona X trial? Could come down to the big step that has seen 2 of the riders fail and saw Adam Raga cost himself marks as well. Nothing dropped so far for Tony Bowe. He's got 1 mark to play with to guarantee himself victory. Is this the moment that Tony Bowe returns to the top step of the podium? Urged on by the fans here in Barcelona and by his minder at the top of the step. Bowe's up. That's 1 mark dropped though. He can't afford another in the remainder of this section 6, and time is ticking away. That's going to be another there on observation. And there goes a time penalty for time as well, 60 seconds elapsing. I would suggest he tried to rush through the closing stages of the section knowing that time was short, and that's cost him 2 marks. So disappointment for Tony Bowe in section 6. His opportunity to seal the trial with a section to spare evaporates, and it will go down to a decider in section number 7. Fitting really, section 7, the centrepiece of this newly laid out Barcelona X trial. The riders weren't excessively concerned about the difficulty of this tower during their walk of the sections earlier, but at 27 metres in length and 7 metres in height, it's nonetheless a pretty impressive structure, and new to Barcelona, thanks to new section designer Bernard Estripeau for 2016. Gironi Fajardo is finding life tough in section 7. Just making it up the initial staircase of this tower. Has cost himself 1 mark for leaning, but he does eventually manage to force himself forward and continue on through section 7. Already consigned to 4th place, of course, after 5 consecutive failed sections. Gironi Fajardo hasn't made it onto the podium in Barcelona since 2007 and won't be doing so here tonight. But he'll want to end on a high note here in Barcelona, and it looks as though he's set to complete this section 7. Loses a mark there on time, so he is going to be outside of the 60-second time allowance. He's already dropped 2 marks, therefore, on this 7th section, but it's not going to be a fail like a run of consecutive failures that Gironi Fajardo suffered here tonight. In the end, he finishes with a 2 on section 7 and a lap total of 27. Albert Cabestan next up. The veteran already has 3rd position sealed. He's got to clean this section if he wants to remain in mathematical contention for 2nd place. Realistically, 3rd and 4th positions look largely settled, but anything can happen in a last section decider. This is where Gironi Fajardo dropped his 1st mark, and Cabestan will drop 1 as well. So that's positions 3 and 4 settled tonight in Barcelona. Albert Cabestan will finish 3rd, Gironi Fajardo in 4th, and it's up to Bowe and Raga now to dictate those 1st and 2nd positions. Albert Cabestan presses on through. He'll be frustrated at his mid-lap loss of form. Cost himself 8 marks in sections 3 and 4, where Tony Bowe dropped just 1. That proving the deciding factor in Albert Cabestan slipping to the last step of the podium, but it will nonetheless be a second consecutive podium finish for Albert Cabestan, who drops just 1 mark in section 7 after coming through within time, so it can be done in 60 seconds. Fajardo finishing his lap on 27, Albert Cabestan finishing his on 19. Adam Raga now guaranteed second position after that drop mark from Albert Cabestan. He can afford a maximum of 1 to remain in contention for this X-Trial, and he's dropped 1 on that initial step. Fajardo and Cabestan both dropped a mark there. He can't afford to drop any more though, or that will give Tony Bow the X-Trial. Already Raga's waiting for an unlikely final section collapse from Tony Bow. Cabestan and Fajardo have both made it through section 7 in relatively straightforward fashion. And Tony Bow only needs to avoid dropping a 5 now to win in Barcelona. Such an excellent start to his debut with the TRS team for Adam Raga. Winner last time out in Sheffield. He's going to need a miracle though in Barcelona if he wants to take victory. 5 marks separate Bow and Raga, with 1 section remaining for Tony Bow. The master of the X-Trial discipline can only be beaten if he scores a 5 in this section. That result would force him into a tie-break situation with Adam Raga. Any other results here will give Bow the win and will restore him to top spot in the championship. Tied on points, admittedly, with Adam Raga. Who will become the king of the castle on section 7? It's Bow or Raga in Barcelona. 1 mark down for Tony Bow. Conceding on observation in exactly the same position as Fajardo, Cabestan and Raga all before him. But that won't concern Tony Bow to too great an extent. He's just got to avoid any catastrophic errors in the closing stages. The fans can feel that this is the moment. Tony Bow took one of 4 2015 victories here in Barcelona. And he's going to take a 2016 victory, his first of the campaign. Tony Bow is back on top in Barcelona. A 17-mark spread in the final, with Gironi Fajardo tailed off dramatically and Albert Cabestan taking the final step of the podium. It's been a tough night from the start of qualifying. Afterwards, I bounced back well. I felt comfortable in the final, putting a lot of pressure on the others. Unfortunately, a bizarre decision in Section 3 left us down in the rankings. I tried to react by not using the sump in the trunk section, but it didn't work out and cost me a 5. A shame because I was riding well, I tried hard, and I can only say that I'll continue on and congratulate Tony on his excellent riding and a great victory today.
Y bueno, solo puedo decir que lo seguiremos intentando y felicitar a Tony por ese excelente pilotaje y victoria de hoy.
I'm very happy with today's second place. In the final, a few mistakes kept me from the victory, but I was close. I have to be happy with my riding and with the development that we're undergoing. The truth is that Section 5 was a bit of a fright, but my feeling today has been very good. I suffered towards the end of the race because I hadn't been able to open out a big gap, but I'm happy because my riding was good, particularly on the first lap and in the first part of the final, and of course the result's great for the championship. Eddie Carlson moves above James Dable in the standings following his defeat of Jaime Busto in Barcelona, but elsewhere the only change to the pecking order comes at the top. Tony Bow returns to position number 1 after 2 successive X-Trials without a win and ties on points with Adam Raga for top spot overall. Round 1 was a story of change, but round 2 was all about more Barcelona brilliance from Bow.